Welcome back to Face the State. In January, at the start of the new year, the plan is for a special session for lawmakers to vote on a transportation plan, which does include tolls, but on trucks only. Governor Lamont is following Rhode Island's lead, but right now that state is being sued by the trucking industry. However, Governor Lamont says trucks do the most damage on Connecticut roads and bridges, and his plan, he says, is a fair one.
What we are saying is we have old bridges and 90-year-old rail bridges. They're in a state of, not all in a state of good repair. We got to fix it. We got to find a way to pay for it. I don't want to pay for it by raiding the rainy day fund. I've got a good way to do it on a consistent basis going forward, and the truckers are going to be part of that solution.
Joining us this morning is Joe Scully, the president of the Motor Transport Association of Connecticut. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Rhode Island, we just want to give people a little update on that. They are being sued. There hasn't been a victory, but the courts have not thrown that out. Governor Lamont had said at the beginning of the session that he was concerned about that litigation and didn't want to see the state of Connecticut get into that. Now seems to be okay with it. What is your concern about this lawsuit and Rhode Island?
Yeah, I believe he was concerned about the legality of it and also that truck-only tolls would not raise enough revenue. So I'm not totally sure what has changed other than the significant pushback against tolls by individuals and businesses in this state. There are claims that Rhode Island assures the state of Connecticut they are going to win the lawsuit. What I would say is Rhode Island fought very hard to try to get that case out of federal court and into state court, and they lost. I think the state of Rhode Island is worried about the legality of their case and being able to win in federal court. So because of all those things, I think our side is quite confident we're on a level playing field. We're going to get a fair shake in a federal court. And there is no assurance that what they are doing is legal, nor would it be legal if we tried to just simply do it here in Connecticut right now.
Well, I think if they are concerned about it, they're not doing it openly. I went to Rhode Island. We did a story on it. I interviewed the governor and their DOT person, and they feel confident that, you know, they're still collecting revenue, and they seem confident. I'm not sure if that is, you know, something that they want the public to believe, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I think nobody wants to blink in this argument, so to speak. They're not going to admit that they were wrong or they're worried. They can always wait until a negative ruling for them comes down from the federal court and probably flip the switch and toll cars, which some people in our industry believe was the plan all along. I think it's pretty clear that that's what the approach in Connecticut is. I mean, we've seen 3 or 4 different plans on tolling cars. The cards have already been played. I don't think you can take that back and say, never mind, we're just going to stick to the trucks. I think the cards have been on the table, and the people of Connecticut know where this is really going.
Well, I think what you said at the beginning, I think, is absolutely right, that there was so much backlash with cars and trucks that the governor had to back off on that. And I think people are concerned about tolls. The one or a couple of things that people point out with tolls, it does share the burden to out-of-state drivers, maybe as many as 40%. And why not put a user fee on trucks that do damage to our roads more than cars? Why not?
Well, I would say, one, there's no proof, and maybe we'll get back to this in a minute, that trucks do significantly more damage to roads than cars do. As far as user fees, the trucking industry pays 32% of all road taxes owed in the state, even though they're only 5% of the miles. So I look at that as we're paying 6 times our fair share. The trucking industry pays taxes and fees that passenger car owners and operators don't, such as the heavy vehicle use tax, a federal excise tax, which is 12% on the purchase of a, let's say, $150,000 truck. There's a federal tire tax. There's the unified carrier registration fee, which is a very progressive fee schedule. The bigger your fleet, the higher the fee you pay annually. It could be as high as $66,000 annually. So we are paying our fair share and then some. Perhaps if you're not in the trucking industry, you don't know about these things because you don't see them, but they're there and they're huge costs to us. If you break all that down, one 18-wheel tractor trailer in Connecticut pays more than $17,000 per year in taxes. To me, those are user fees. That's paying our fair share.
Right, and I remember at the beginning of this debate, you know, people saying, well, trucks don't pay anything, and I think that's not true. You clearly do. But I want to address the damage issue. I mean, through this debate, the Speaker of the House The majority leader all said, trucks do 80% of the damage. And then I've heard from the Department of Transportation that because trucks have 6 axles, the weight is evenly distributed. Then I have a report here from Congress that basically says that the trucks that are on our roads do as much damage as nearly 10,000 vehicles.
So the 80% number is made up. There is no credible source for it, and I think people have been caught, and so that's why they've pivoted away from that and over to the 9,600. One truck reportedly does the same damage as 9,600 cars. That is a bogus statistic in our opinion. That was derived, and I use that term loosely, from 1950s era pavement tests when they were trying to make the pavement collapse to see what are the construction standards that we need to use. So based on a test where they got the pavement to collapse, some folks who wanted to target the trucking industry did some crazy calculation and came up with that number. The National Academy of Sciences Transportation Research Board says if a highway is properly designed and constructed to handle the traffic that will be on it, it will only presumably require routine maintenance. They said there is a misconception that trucks damage roads more than cars. And one final point to that, the reason we know that's true, something called the federal bridge formula, codified in federal law, and it talks about whatever the gross weight of your truck is, has to be over a certain number of axles, and the axles have to be spaced a certain length apart, and the entire length of the truck has to be a certain distance. The federal bridge formula ensures that a truck cannot inherently damage a road or a bridge. And we have weigh stations to confirm that the trucking companies are in compliance with that.
And I think you've mentioned to me before that the weight limit in Connecticut is considerably less than what, neighboring states?
All the states around us have 100,000 pound or more interstate weight limits. Connecticut only has 80,000 pounds. So I think it's ridiculous to say that, oh, trucks are tearing up our roads. Well, the roads in surrounding states are fine with heavier trucks. And not only that, trucking companies in Connecticut are put at a disadvantage. They have to take more truck trips, which requires more fuel, more personnel, more vehicles to accomplish the same thing that trucking companies in other states can. For anybody who wants trucks off the road, I'll say, give us 100,000 pounds, yet they seem to not want that either. Unfortunately, I think there's a anti-truck sentiment out there, which is very unfortunate. Everything that we buy comes on a truck. If the trucking industry didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to go to the store and buy food and clothes and gasoline. So trucking is critical to the American economy.
I think I've also read, and it was to your point about, the maybe modern infrastructure. So the roads and bridges that have been built in the past few decades are meant to withstand pressure. We don't really have 90-year-old bridges. We may have 90-year-old rail bridges, but we don't have 90-year-old roads. So are you saying that those, our infrastructure is designed to handle trucks? And honestly, that go from, all you have to do, especially on a holiday and see, or on a busy weekend, see trucks going from New York to Boston and never stopping in Connecticut, and there are a lot of them.
Well, I would say as far as trucks coming through Connecticut and not stopping, we do get tax and fee money from those trucks through a couple of interstate taxing agreements. One that allows us to tax diesel fuel used by the trucking companies that come through Connecticut. Doesn't matter what state they're based in, doesn't matter what state they bought their fuel in. If you travel through Connecticut and burn diesel fuel, you will pay a tax to Connecticut on that. And there's a similar system for registration fees. So the state gets about $30 million a year just from out-of-state trucks.
All right, we are running out of time, but one quick question. If tolls go into effect on trucks only, do you think that that will mean increased costs for the consumer? I've heard many companies here in Connecticut say, we're going to pay more, the customer's going to pay more.
Look, it's an expense, and it's going to be a big one. Any business, especially trucking companies, have to figure out what are their overhead expenses. And then based on that, they figure out what do we have to charge in order to, yes, make a profit. You have to make a profit. You have to make some money to stay in business. So bottom line is, yes, they will have to adjust, and they will pass along costs to their customers, which is ultimately the end consumer in Connecticut.
Joe Scully, I want to thank you for joining us here on Face the State, and the debate over tolls continues.